This is our next episode of Marshall County Memoirs, a podcast where we look at the history of Marshall County and the people around it. Today we have a former teacher. He was also part of the House of Delegates and Marshall County Commissioner. This is Mike Ferro. Thank you, Mike, for joining us.
Thank you.
So we're going to talk a little bit about your history in Marshall County. Tell us some of your favorite early memories of living in Marshall County. Just give us a brief autobiography of your life.
Well, I moved to Marshall County when I was 4 years old after my dad had been killed in a car train accident, and we lived right by Union, the old Union High School. And I can remember just sitting out and watching the kids going to school there. Lived in South Benwood, which was a really a great place to grow up. A lot of kids there. We had 2 baseball fields. We had a playground just off the beaten path, off Route 2, which Route 2 was the old highway at that time. The 4-lane highway was not there. So those were great memories for me as a kid growing up in that South Benwood area.
That's great. Have you traveled around? Did you have trips to Moundsville now and then, or any other towns around Marshall County?
Yeah, back in the day, we primarily, because there were really no big grocery stores at that time, so we just went to the local grocery stores in Benwood, McMecken. Obviously went to Moundsville on occasion. Wheeling is where my mom mostly went. We would catch the city bus at that time and drive and go to Wheeling. And as I got older, we would take the bus up every Saturday, and there were several bowling alleys up there that we would go bowl and go to the movies and just have a good time. Go to some of the local men's stores at that time because they were some of the family-owned stores. So yeah, we traveled around, but we're pretty limited. There weren't that many cars at that time, and you visited family more than you did anything. I can remember on Sundays, every time we went after church, we always went to my cousin's house, and that's where all the family would be, and we would spend the afternoon there. It was always a lot of fun.
Definitely a different viewpoint of the area in comparison to nowadays.
It's totally different now.
Yeah.
It really is. Sadly.
What about your school years? Where did you go for school in Marshall County?
I started out, I went to St. James Grade School in McMecken for my primary years, 1 through 8. Went to Union High School in Benwood, 9 through 11, and great place, absolutely great place, small local school. And then when I was a senior, that's when the consolidation started between Union, Moundsville, and Sherrard, and we went to John Marshall. So my wife and I were 2 of the first graduates of John Marshall High School. Played basketball there, played baseball there, pretended to run cross country, but and I really enjoyed John Marshall High School. Big change from the traditional school at Union. We had what they called the modular schedule. Everything operated on 15-minute segments, and you had class time, you had free time, you had lectures, you had labs. They put a lot of the onus of the responsibility on the student at that time, and it was certainly different than what we had established in a traditional public school.
And then after John Marshall, what did you do after that?
I went to West Liberty State College, graduated in 4 years, a couple summer schools thrown in with a teaching degree. My background is in social studies. In fact, a good friend of mine, Gene Amarante, who's a basketball coach at Belair, he said, "Hey, Mike," he said, "I'm going to get an English degree with it. Why don't we do that?" And I went, "Okay." With no intention, I went ahead and got that degree in language arts, and guess what I taught for 35 years when I taught in the public school? I taught primarily 7th grade English.
7th grade English. Big change from social studies, that's for sure.
There's no question about that.
You were a teacher for 35 years, and just tell us about that experience. Tell us about how it was with the students, and what kind of areas did you look at?
I got hired on March 13, 1974. I graduated in 73 from West Liberty. Didn't get a teaching job right away. Got on the substitute list. I worked at Wheeling Pittsburgh Steel in Benwood for those several months. Great experience, I can tell you that. Everybody needs to work in a factory and perform factory work, okay, to appreciate it. Got hired in March of 73, as I said. at Moundsville Junior High at that particular time. Then in the summer of '74, I received a call from Don Yost, who was principal at Sherrard, who was actually my high school algebra teacher, said, "Hey, Mike, I've got an English job up here and 2 coaching jobs. You want to come up?" And that was before you had to bid on jobs, and I said, absolutely. I had student taught up there, great place, country school. It was the old school that's no longer there. And I taught in a trailer for 2 years and averaged 32 kids in a trailer. And I needed binoculars to see the ones that were in the back. They still might be there wherever the trailers are. I don't know, but it was a wonderful experience. And then we moved over to the new school in '76, and I retired in 2010, I believe, 9 or 10, I can't remember. And I tell people too, I had the best job in the world. Absolutely loved what I did. Loved Sherrard Junior High, middle school now. And I failed to mention, too, that I coached in Marshall County for 40 years. A lot of those years at Sherrard and the other years at John Marshall in basketball.
Oh, basketball. How was your students? Did you get any awards for?
Yeah, I mean, every once in a while. It was funny because one of my students said one time, "Mr. Ferro," said, "how come you don't get Teacher of the Year award?" I said, "I want to be Teacher of the Career." He said, "That brings tears to my eyes." I just started laughing. I thought it was funny, but I played basketball, like I said, at John Marshall. I still hold the oldest record there. In December of '68, I was 15 for 15 from the foul line against Wheeling High, and that record stands today, which I'm proud of.
That is very impressive. It's hard to have a record nowadays that hasn't been broken for so long. Wow. So you went from teaching to politics. What was that transition about?
I had been interested in politics for a long time, and obviously didn't want to get involved. I was married, we were still married, had younger kids. I was coaching, and I just kind of rebuffed all the efforts to get me involved in that. But I knew that politics played a big part in my job. If you're a teacher, politics matters. I can tell you that because the state legislature is the one that controls everything that goes on with regard to salary, with regard to benefits and things like that. Although we're county employees, the state is the one that controls that. And I can tell you this, that my first couple of years in education, we took days off, one day in the '70s, one day in the '80s, to march on Charleston. During the legislature, took days off without pay, and at that particular time, if you took a day off without pay, you got 0 credit for the year, which was bold on our part. Young, dumb, stupid, whatever it may be, but we were committed to trying to make ourselves better in terms of our livelihoods. Fortunately, in 1976, the legislature reversed that. They rescinded that, and we were able to receive full credit for those years, which made a big difference when I retired. I got involved with that, and a good friend of mine, Scott Varner, was also a teacher, administrator, and he was a majority whip for actually 20 years at the West Virginia House of Delegates. And Scott kind of convinced me to run. In fact, I was coming home from where I was scouting a basketball game over at Meadowbrook, and I stopped at a gas station, got out my phone and said, "Scott, I'm in." And he said, "Oh, great, we'll do this. I said, "Now I got to think about what to tell Roseanne." So anyway, it was a journey, a lot of hard work. The campaign part was difficult. There'd be times I'd be walking around on a Sunday afternoon, the first time I ran, and I'd think, "Why am I doing this? What am I getting myself into?" Fortunately, I was able to win and serve 5 terms, two-year terms in the legislature. Great experience, absolutely great experience. Met a lot of wonderful people, learned a lot. I don't think people really realize how government operates and what government does. It's not as simple as what people think, and it doesn't happen as quickly as people think. The founding fathers set it up so that there would be more diligence, and you would take your time, so you didn't make rash decisions, and it was set up that particular way. With the 3 branches of government, the executive, legislative, and the judicial, each having equal power, although I think that's definitely changed and not for the better in today's world. But, I spent, like I said, 10 years there, 6 as a member of the majority party, 4 is a member of the minority party. And believe me, there are differences. And what you find out is that the majority rules, okay? Any bills that the majority wants passed, they are introduced by majority members, they get passed. So if you like those bills, you applaud the majority. Whether they're the Democrats at one time or the Republicans now, you applaud them. If they're bills that hurt you, then you got to say, you have to go against your party a little bit. This doesn't work. This does not work for the county I live in, which leads me to the county commission.
All right. So, what are your some of your proud achievements for your time serving in the House of Delegates? Many bills that you fought for and were successful with?
Yeah, there were several bills that I sponsored. One did not get passed, which I really wanted to, because we're in the heart of oil and gas country, and the trucks that travel our roads, I mean, they tear up the roads considerably. And I had a bill and had it out several years. Again, sometimes with a majority. When I was in the majority, sometimes minority. But it was to put $30 million or $40 million into a general fund, which would take care of secondary roads only in Marshall County. It was not for pay increases. It was not for equipment. It was not for ditching or anything like that. It was for taking care of roads. And what it would have done, it would have been split up with all the other oil and gas producing counties. There was a formula that they had used for that. It wouldn't have been a considerable amount of money for Marshall County, but it would have been a start. Because I think once it would have passed, and we would have received, let's say, $2 million just for patching or whatever, road maintenance or whatever it is. In the years to follow, a lot of the oil and gas counties would say, hey, wait a minute, this is good, but it's not good enough. And we would have been able to get more. Unfortunately, it didn't pass. But I don't count it as a defeat. That's just the way it kind of works down there. But it was a good time. We passed. I think you just saw in the paper maybe that Marshall County Schools is continuing to feed every kid breakfast and lunch. We passed Feed to Achieve, which was at that particular time, which allowed kids to have that free breakfast and free lunch. And every kid, not just the ones that were on free or reduced lunch. Because I'll tell you what, the stigma that's attached to that, when you have to ask a kid in the morning or ask your class in the morning, hey, how many of you are free lunch? And you have to write that down. And the hands go up and things like that. How many of you are reduced lunch? That's what we had to do.
Oh, okay.
It was horrible. Okay, and then how many are on bringing their lunch, or how many are paying, or whatever it may be. Now they all are the same. There is no stigma attached, social stigma attached to it. No negative social stigma.
That's great. I mean, I've had that when I was a kid too, where I was in high school and had to get reduced lunch just because my parents couldn't really afford it. And I mean, I can live in this area, but I had that similar situation. So having free lunch is definitely important for the kids. I mean, no matter how much income they get from their parents, it's just gotta eat.
I would have been one of those kids as well. As I told you, my dad got killed when I was 4 years old. My mom and I lived with our grandparents. And I tell people that in 1955, the welfare wasn't invented back then, okay? But basically, my mom and I grew up on that. It was called Social Security death benefits, okay? And she received a small check to help raise me, and then I received a small check as well, which I was able to keep until I graduated college. But I tell people all the time, I was on that social system as well.
Definitely can relate.
Don't knock it unless it happens to you.
Exactly. Like walk a mile in my shoes,
Mm-hmm.
That's what they say.
Absolutely. There were other bills, too, if I may add. I mean, obviously, my profession is education, and there were many, many bills to harm public education. And I spoke numerous times on those bills. You talk about vouchers, which now they have what they call that Hope Scholarship, which is nothing more than a voucher, giving public money to private entities. Some of them are dance schools, some of them are equestrian schools. There are a lot of things that are really wrong with that particular program. We talked about alternative certification, where basically if you had a college degree, you could come in and teach, which, if I'm a I couldn't go in and be a doctor just because I have a college degree.
Right.
Even though I played operation, as a child. Okay. I mean, and there were a number of things. The TiVo Act, which allowed homeschool kids to participate in all public school activities and things like that. I mean, I'm a purist. I was a public school guy, and same thing with our PEI, our Public Employees Insurance. Made many speeches on PEI, which, if you pay attention right now, is still a bone of contention, and has not been fixed in West Virginia. And I was down here this year with the Hope Scholarship, or Hope Voucher, as I call it, where they added supplementals of $62 million to boost the Hope Scholarship Fund to $100 million, which is what it's going to cost this year to fund that. Next year, the projection is $300 to $400 million. Is what it's going to cost from public schools, or cost the taxpayer $300 to $400 to fund this Hope Voucher. And my contention is, why not take care of the people that have worked for you, the retirees, the people that work for you now, with regard to your PEIA. You could almost permanently fund PEIA if you can find the $300 million, like they're going to find to fund that Hope Voucher. I get a little bit angry when we talk about things like that. But
That's okay.
again, I don't apologize for it.
Well, that's okay. You can rant all you want.
Yeah.
This is the podcast dedicated to you, Mike.
So you said that Scott Varner got you to run. What exactly, was there anything that he said, or was it just, like, what was the tipping point? What made you officially decide?
Scott was the majority whip down there for a long, long time. Scott spent 20 years. I spent 4 years with him, but he talked about it. We need you down here, and there was an incumbent here in town that because it was a 2-member district at that time, and allegedly Scott was running for Speaker of the House, and allegedly the delegate that was here with him did not vote for him. And I think that probably was very difficult for Scott. And I don't want to say that for sure. I don't want to get into that, but that's what basically I had heard. And again, they just kept telling me, hey, you could be good. You know a lot of people. You're involved. You taught. You communicate well, and things of that nature. And I bit into it, and I don't regret it at all. Great experience, absolutely wonderful experience. And as I said, both in majority and minority.
That's good. That's good. So tell us how active you were around Marshall County. I mean, I know that you were part of the library, well, you still are part of the library board, and go into details on that.
Well, I think, anybody who knows me, they would see me in almost everywhere in Marshall County. Library board, health board. I was on the senior citizen board. And just various functions that I would attend all the time. You talk about steak fries, you talk about street fairs, you talk about anything that went on. I was there in Marshall County. I always tried to be a great ambassador for Marshall County. And I know statewide I was held in pretty high esteem. I was on the executive board. I was a vice president of the County Commission Association. I was on the board of directors of the Association of Counties. And that's all of the elected officials, 400 and some. We talk about assessors and clerks and things of that nature. And actually, I did basically a class, a PowerPoint on how the legislature functions and how it affects county commissions. And I went through that with a lot of the commissioners, because a lot of them really don't understand, or a lot of the other elected officials don't understand how government works. They run for office just because I want to be a commissioner. It's like, okay, what do you do? Well, I don't know, but I'll do this. And I think that a lot of times these commissioners try to and other elected officials try to overstep their bounds. There are boundaries and things that commissioners are allowed to do, not allowed to do. Same thing with assessors and clerks and sheriffs and everything like that. Commissioners do not tell any of those other elected officials what to do and what not to do. They are the elected officials of the county, and they operate their own agencies. The commission funds those particular agencies. And also the commissioners have what we call advice and consent. The only thing that commissioners do is when, let's just say, a sheriff would bring in, want to hire a deputy, then he would present that name and tell who it was, and then the commissioners would either accept it or reject it. Okay. Firing, the commissioners have nothing to do with termination of employees except with the ones that they're under their control.
Some responsibilities, that's for sure.
There's a lot. There really is a lot. It's and again, what I try to do was promote Marshall County to the people in the state, and oftentimes wherever I went, they say, Mike, you guys are knocking it out of the park. You guys are really doing great. A couple of things I'm really proud of is terms of commissioners. And we had 3 commissioners at that time. Well, still they do, but Scott Varner, and we kind of divided up into what, I don't know whether there are talents or not, but we did this simply because to let one guy take care of certain things. Scott would take care of mostly the budget things. Scott's a numbers guy, okay? John Grzinskis, former sheriff, former state policeman. John did a lot of the things that were with law enforcement and with EMS and stuff like that. Those were his kind of bailiwick things. They kind of turned me loose in Charleston. Even though Scott had spent 20 years down there, I was there later than Scott. Some of my contacts were still there. But a couple bills, and you're always under attack from Charleston, especially with oil and gas and coal severance. And during my tenure down there, I think I was able to save Marshall County somewhere in the range of $25 million. Knowing the players down there, having the contacts down there, having it work the system. One in particular was Senate Bill 655, which would have crushed Marshall County, a lot of other oil-producing counties, gas and oil-producing counties. That particular bill would have cost Marshall County $9 million. It passed the Senate. It was during COVID, so we weren't paying as close of attention as we should have during COVID. It was crazy times. I got wind of it. I went down, spoke to the committee in the House where it was going to go, explained the situation, and the chair of that committee said, "I won't run it, Mike." So it was immediately saved Marshall County $9 million, of which the school systems get 72% of that. Okay, that money. So it saved them, probably about $7 million. There were other bills, House Bill 2581, 2336, oil and gas bills that again were multiple millions of dollars that we were able to pare down a little bit. Didn't completely gain all the money from that, but we pared it down. A couple coal severance bills too, which are actually used entirely by Marshall County for infrastructure projects. There were bills that they were going to take another 20% off of our coal severance, which would have cost Marshall County $2 to $3 million a year. A couple of those I was able to stop, and so far they've not been able to pass that, but they're going to continue. They're trying in different ways. It showed up differently this year.
Oh, so different.
Different
approach.
Different approach. Yeah, but I didn't have anything to do with it this year. I mean.
Now you were officially retired, right?
Yeah, I guess I am. I pay attention to what goes on. We try to tell people, and I tell you what we did too last year, where there were taxpayers that the tax department really screwed up, and there was a $5 million bill that would have gone back on people that had already paid their taxes, but didn't pay enough. Okay, but it was a mistake by the tax department. So we ate it. We ate that. The Marshall County Commission ate it. But we certainly let the tax department know that this can't happen again. And we also said that, hey, the good times, and Marshall County had some good times there, good years, because of oil, gas, and coal. But those are ending. And I know this year they were about 17 million down projected from the year before.
That's a big change.
Because and they were able to keep the levy rate the same. They didn't have to raise the levy rate. They were able to keep benefits and wages the same, and maybe gave a bump, I don't really know, in wages, simply because we had put money away, ARPA money away, American Rescue Plan money away, in anticipation of something like this happening. Next year could be a different story. If they project that they're going to lose another 17 million, they've got some tough decisions to make. A lot of commissioners, they run on, hey, I'm going to lower taxes. Well, commissioners don't raise and lower taxes. They don't have anything to do with that. The levy rate is what they set The assessor is the one that assesses your houses and lets you know what you pay. But there could be a higher levy rate. I mean, there could be. I don't know. But there could be. A lot of people run on things that they can't follow up with.
Well, let's hope that your predictions are not follow through. That's
Yeah,
for sure.
we all hope that good days will be there. But I've been here too when Marshall County and Marshall County schools suffered because of the downturn in the economy and in industry. We were loaded with industry back in the 70s. And then all of a sudden, they all left. They left the area. Middle class left, and population left.
Yeah, that's actually what my question was.
Okay.
I was going to see how you have seen Marshall County change since you were part of the House of Delegates and later the commissioner.
Yeah, even before that, I mean, you talk about all the steel mills that were here, the chemical plants had more people. The coal mines had hired more people. There were other conduit, the glass plants, Fostoria, and several others. The toy plant, number of those facilities that had a lot of people working for them. And we almost ran into that again. My wife and I were in Charleston. It was Christmas of 2020, and over the TV it talked about 3 coal-fired power plants that were going to shut down if these 2 EPA rulings were not applied immediately. And they mentioned the Mitchell plant. It was like, my God, what's going on here? So immediately I got on the phone, I called back, I called the external affairs girl from AEP. She said, I know a little bit about it, not a lot, but I'm going to tell you, we did our homework on that. We worked it hard, talked to every higher political person. I talked to the PSC, Wendy Braswell was her name, the lawyer for them on this case. I must have talked to her 15 times about that. And we brought in the plant manager from the Mitchell plant. And he told us that, he said there are 2 EPA rulings, and they were applied in 2019, an air rule and a water rule, that if they weren't taken care of, if neither one would have been taken care of, the Mitchell plant would have closed in December of 21. It would have been that year. If one of them was taken care of, it would have been 2028. If both of them, it was 2040. Okay, so they had a Save the Mitchell plant thing at the Moundsville Volunteer Fire Department one day, which the West Virginia Coal Association ran, who I let them know about what was going on too. But anyway, they weren't going to let me speak or say, you're not on the agenda. And that's why I've got all this information. As a commission, we've done all this work. And they said, well, if there's time at the end, we'll let you. I said, no, I need to speak on this. Finally, I said, I'm going to speak. I told him that. I mean, I did. I flat out told him that. And then a week later, in front of the PSC, I actually was able to, because of the contacts I had, I was able to actually go down. Lisa Zukoff and I actually went down and spoke in person on the ramifications, what would happen if the Mitchell plant closed. And I said I went through that back in the 1970s. I saw what it did, how it decimated Marshall County. This would do the same thing. Had Mitchell closed immediately, it would have cost Marshall County $4 million in tax revenue. And then you go through the domino effect, okay, and what it might do to car dealerships and grocery stores and the housing market and everything like that. And I saw that happen. When John Marshall, when we first opened in 1968, we had close to 1,500 kids in John Marshall with 3 grades. Now there are barely 1,000 with 4 grades. So numbers don't lie, okay? Yeah. And that's basically as a result of what happened 30, 40 years ago.
It's quite a transformation, that's for sure, even in school system.
What is it about Marshall County that you love?
I've always been a Marshall County guy. The people, I mean, the willingness of people to help people in need. I've seen that. There's always a benefit to help someone out. They have these steak fries to help people. I think Marshall County is the steak fry capital of the world. And you talk about that, you get down and tell your fellow commissioners or fellow delegates about that, and they go, what are those things? What are steak fries? They have no idea.
Yeah, I
You
didn't
tell
know that other people didn't know what steak
No,
fries
it's
were.
it's a
I,
truth.
I didn't even know
No
what steak
idea.
fries
Well,
were.
you probably didn't. I mean, but it's
blew
one
my
of the
mind.
one of the big fundraisers that we have around here. But people are always willing to help. I mean, you can see that anytime there's a flood or whatever, people will step up. I mean, they'll go buy materials. They'll supply water or cleaning supplies or whatever it may be. In times of a crisis. I mean, so you see that people are good-hearted in Marshall County. But I think that sometimes too that they pay too much attention to what goes on in the national news, okay, and they don't pay attention to what goes on locally, because they're actually doing locally the things that are against what the national news will talk about. If you get my drift here, okay?
I get it.
Yeah.
Wow. I can agree with that. This area has definitely been a lot of people care about one another. They're like family. I mean, Gary Ryder mentioned it in our last interview that a lot of the factory workers were family. They worked together and they had barbecues, they had get-togethers. They were just all really close with one another. And you could definitely see that in this area. It's quite a shock in comparison to other parts of the country.
Well, let me go back to when I was a kid. Again, single mom at that time, and grieving widow, and lived in an area where the people that lived in my neighborhood on Ashland Avenue took good care of me. They made sure, Mike, did you have anything to eat? Which I was well taken care of at home, don't get me wrong. But they were always trying to do something for you. Hey, do you want to go here with us? Do you want to go to a ball game with us? Whatever it may have been. You became part of a family back in those days. You were just another one of their kids, okay? And again, I still see that today, just not as much. And times have changed. There's no question about that.
Right, that's true. Times do change, and it's just different insight on Marshall County when talking to other people who have been here their whole lives in comparison to somebody that just moved here. So I do have one more question for you, and we talked about this before the interview started. We want to talk about your history with the law.
Oh, God, okay. All right.
Yeah.
I shouldn't have opened my big mouth, but, in 1969, Cook's opened in Benwood. It's actually in the building that houses where the auto choice is now in North Benwood. And on the other side, where the Ferns Healthplex is, there was a grocery store at that time. Well, my mom worked up there, and I was going into college, and I was commuting to West Liberty, and as I said, didn't have much money. Minimum wage at that time was $1.25 an hour, and I got hired to work. And in Cook's, you worked on Sundays, okay, which was, I didn't know it was a no-no back then because of what they called the Sunday blue laws. So, on Sundays, I made time and a half, from $1.25 up to $1.85. Like I told you, that was good beer money
Good beer
back then, okay? I'm not going to lie. And I worked, it had to be mid-October maybe, I'm not sure. I started in September, mid-October. And anyway, one day on a Sunday, here comes all these state policemen in with all these Malesville merchants, and they arrested the women cashiers and me. And I was a bagger at that time. Took us down to what was then the Squire system in local law, which is now the magistrate system. And then it was my job to go out and get names so that there could be a referendum, so it could be put up for a vote. Okay, and I think they may have done that statewide. But anyway, the referendum came up. The state passed that the Sunday blue laws were no longer in existence. Of course, they dropped the charges in, but that's my brush with the law right there. But I didn't know. I mean, they just took me. They didn't handcuff us or anything like that. I mean, there was nothing like that.
Just making sure with that.
Those are the people that are my age or older and maybe just a little bit younger will remember the Sunday blue laws.
Sunday blue laws. Yep, there you have it, folks. Says Mike Ferro's Run with the Law. One time Run with the Law. Maybe that was like the early phases of getting really into politics as 1969. You're just going for that.
I live kind of a boring life. I want to mention too, if I get one more minute here, they talked about with oil and gas. There was something that when oil and gas came in, it was like the Homestead Act. All of a sudden, these trucks and that just came pouring in here. Nobody really knew what they were going to do. They talked about Marcellus Shale and things of that nature. And when I was in the legislature, I know Governor Tomlin called us in before Christmas and said, "Hey, if you don't get a Marcellus bill done, you're staying here for Christmas." Well, we got one done. I don't think it was the best bill in the world, but we did get one done because we didn't want to spend Christmas in Charleston. But the next year, when there was a change in politics, that's when they tried to pass forced pooling, which meant that if you owned property, you didn't have the right to say, no, you can't drill or lease that property. They could take it from you. They could just say, okay, we're going to give you 12.5%, take it or leave it. You can't do anything about it. And they made it a political thing to make it look like those of us that were against forced pooling were against oil and gas. Well, that's not true. That is not true. What we were against was the mandatory forcing someone to lease their property when they didn't want it leased. You know, you own property, and you look in the mirror. You make that decision. If you think, hey, I don't want to lease it, and then all of a sudden people are making a lot of money around you and you're not, you know what? You have to look in the mirror and say, that was my fault. But for somebody to come in and mandate that you lease your property at that amount, to us it was wrong. And we beat that. We ended up beating that on the last day of the session down here. Since then, they've come up with something called co-tenancy, which we called forced pooling light. And in now recent years, they basically have gone to forced pooling, but they changed the name now, so nobody knows what it is. They're basically forcing people to pool their and lease their property now. I'm firmly against that. I believe in property rights. I believe in property rights of the owners.
Right. And once again, they're doing a different approach, just to try to change people's
they weren't very
on
smart by calling it forced pooling.
forced pooling.
They could have called it something a little bit more, germane, and it would have been okay.
Yeah.
But we probably might not have known that in Charleston.
But I can definitely see just how everybody really appreciates your efforts for working with Marshall County and to ensure that people get what they need. And just people really look up to you for your public service, and that's very crucial for a politician.
Well, I never lied to people. I never made promises I couldn't keep. I did my best. When I taught school, I tried to help kids as much as possible. Same thing with coaching, and I gave everything I could in terms of the House of Delegates and as a commissioner. And I never would apologize for anything that I did while I was in those particular jobs. Like I said, I did my best, and I think it's all you can do. Make mistakes along the way, sure, no question about that. But my heart was always in the right place.
Yep, and you learned from those mistakes. And
absolutely.
Yeah.
You admit them. You admit you made a mistake. There's nothing wrong with that, telling somebody, hey, I screwed up.
That's true. Well, thank you, Mike, for joining us for this podcast episode. We really appreciate you and telling us your involvement in Marshall County and just everything that you've done. We really appreciate you joining us for this.
Thank you. I mean, I've enjoyed this, and again, I hope I didn't go overboard with any of these things. You get me talking, look out. I mean, I'm just roll with it, and as I said, there may be some things that I said that maybe aren't politically correct, but I'm not going to apologize for it.
That's all right with us. We're not really a political podcast, that's for sure. All right. Well, thank you for joining us for this podcast episode. I'm Tanner Skim.
I'm Trent Dayton.
And this is Marshall County Memoirs. Thank you.